Meaning and value in the stories that landscapes tell is a conversation between the coastal scientist Helen Birmingham and myself, Simon Reed, upon our work sounding out perceptions of the Deben Estuary in Suffolk in collaboration with our local community partner, the Deben Estuary Partnership. Our aim is to foster a broader understanding of estuary systems through the strategy of a combined art and science approach.
This project came around at a time that coincided with that need to move the estuary plan on, to basically revise it and take it forward. And actually, having this project has really enabled us collectively to look at the potential for enhancing or widening that participation in the process. And that has happened already in the past in the Deben. But having gone through that process several years ago, it's now clear that it's already needing to be revised and moved forward to the next level.
The research question is very much about how do we extend that community? How do we know that we're getting a broad response from the community in terms of policy and management and so on? People are becoming very aware or very sensitive to decisions made by government institutions on their behalf that perhaps they don't go along with. And the feeling that they need to become much more embedded in understanding how things happen and feeling that they have a kind of involvement in it. Where we are is that the decision making has to go hand in hand with the cultural understanding of the relevance of the decisions made. Well, having started this whole project, New Year 2020, we started off. We made this wonderful timetable, which went right through 2 years, which had loads and loads of public meetings and sort of discursive approach to how the estuary works and how we're going to engage everybody. And suddenly lockdown happened and we couldn't do any of it. And we realised quite quickly that we had to go online. We had to figure out how do we run this as something which is as a discussion happening online rather than person to person, and it was just fortunate that the first lockdown looked like it was going to open up at the end of the summer of 2020, and that we could actually, instead of running an introductory event as a big public meeting in a hall, we could actually do it as an exhibition, which I think we both agreed was a fantastic idea, and it worked fantastically well.
It did. What we managed to do was get many people coming through the door. But what was quite interesting is that I think we got people coming through the door who would never have ever come to a public event if we had have organised one. We kind of touched something in a different way, having done it through this kind of slightly slower process, this slow and low-key process. So we could never have more than, was it 4 people in the room at a time? Because we were trying to be...
Somewhere between 4 and 6, I think.
And everybody had to wear masks, which, I suppose at times made having conversations a little bit challenging. But actually, again, it slowed the whole process down. So you spent a long time talking to somebody about the information that we had available. And I think everybody that came in, they had a personal kind of narrative or a personal conversation about the information that we were presenting.
So what we did first of all is say, well, okay, what visual, physical data do we have on the river which we can show this is our starting point. This is the data we have already, and data which we generated, some of which was generated in 2015. But this is a starting point, and it could be really very vivid. And one of the hooks, if you like, is that it was all there in a shallow space, and people could see it through the window and say, "Oh, what's that?"
Yeah, I mean, it was a very responsive kind of relationship through every single day. People would come in, you would respond to that person, you'd have a conversation, they would respond to you, and so every single kind of interaction was unique, really, because everybody responded in slightly different ways, which allowed for kind of conversations to evolve and for our appreciation, I suppose, of different people's perspectives on the estuary and the broader issues around climate change. They came up because people had the opportunity to place what we had in the gallery in the context of these bigger questions and issues.
One of the important things about our project, I think, is that we are using strategies that are very, very transferable to other projects. That we are the notion of deepening your understanding of a place through being with it over a long period of time is actually nothing new, but applied to this situation in this context of needing to get much more input into the decision-making process in the estuary, that it was really something which was new to them. And also the relationship with mapping and so on is also something which is a very vivid experience for a lot of people. They say, "Oh, I love maps." They come in. So I just came in because I love maps. And you think, "Oh yeah, okay." Well, and it would give you a way in, and when somebody looks at, say, a LiDAR image of the river, they say, "Well, what's that?" And you say, "Oh, it's LiDAR," and they say, "Well, what's that?" And in a way, it's a way into familiarizing them with kinds of ways of data gathering which are maybe familiar to us, but are completely and utterly unfamiliar to a broader public. And you realize that what I think something like this allowed you to do is demystify the whole process. Out of those 250 people, we had 100 names in who wanted to stay in touch with the project. And so immediately it reached out to really quite a broad public, to the extent that people would go away and they would come back, or else they'd bring somebody else back, or else they'd send someone else down to the gallery, and they come in and say, "Oh, so and so got phoned me up and said I've got to come down here and have a look at this."
The word of mouth was quite impressive, because it was quite clear that by day 3 there were people coming through the door who had never come across it, apart from the fact that somebody in their village had mentioned it. To some people, there's a question there of so, for example, in this particular image here, we've got the LiDAR data being visualized on the left and your drawing on the right, and I think some people might question, why would you bother drawing it? And I think I even asked you that question. I don't think I said it quite like that, but I think at some point I said, what is the benefit of drawing this? And I think the way that you described it was interesting.
Because on one hand you could say, well, big map, you can just print it. You say, well, yes, but what it allows you to do is, if you draw something, you have to spend time with it, and you have to you basically rehearse your ideas as you put the information down. You think, well, how do I put this kind of information down here, and what's the relationship between this and that? And so, in a way, I think the process of drawing is an act of becoming. You don't present an idea as a thing to people, you become the idea through the act of making. that kind of sort of concurrence of your understanding of a location and the process of making, of describing it, is, I think, fundamental. Really, the act of making a map is actually the process of deciding for yourself what the priorities are.
I go through a very similar process when I'm dealing with the data. Perhaps it's because I know this place very well, and I know there are parts of it that I don't know as well. And so when I'm looking at data, I'm immediately drawn to things that I don't necessarily know, or that I haven't noticed before, or that don't immediately jump out as being an obvious feature or an obvious kind of thing to explain. So when I go through the process of looking at LiDAR data and creating a map, I am, on one hand, very constrained in my thinking in terms of understanding what are the tide levels, where is the mean high water mark, where is the embankment, where is the salt marsh. So being kind of tied on some levels to these very discrete and specific things, but equally seeing the complexity in the site, in the system, and wanting to, through the process of visualizing it, I suppose, in different ways, to draw out that complexity in more detail so that I can understand it better.
One of the things which we've done is we've started this project which we've called Sounding Change. What it is an open invitation to any participant to contact us to say, yes, I'd like to be involved in this Sounding Change project. And what I would do is I will keep some kind of record or other, an area of landscape that I know very well, and log its changes and use it as a kind of speculative approach to thinking about how change happens in a much broader sense. So you're using the microcosm to look at issues which may be happening on a much grander level. We have one participant who's taking photographs of the knolls on different tidal conditions and different weather conditions. But what he's doing is recording the knolls in a way explores the idea of a minimal landscape. That basically the knolls is a marker of where the atmosphere, the sky meets the water, and where two different qualities meet in a line. And you have in terms of a composed image, you have something which is terribly simple and very nuanced. And what's very interesting about him is that when pressed about it and said, well, are you interested in what happens at different stages of the tide? He said, yes, I am. But to be honest, what I'm really interested in is painting. That these images I'm making remind me so much of simple abstract painting. It is atmospheric, but it's atmospheric filtered through a camera, a lens, Photoshop. But it's actually quite interesting that our understanding of place is very often through evidence which has been created for other purposes. The idea of a place being beautiful and encapsulating beauty is another property. We live in an area of outstanding natural beauty, but if we're pressed to say what's beautiful about it, we don't really know. We say, well, it's just beautiful, isn't it? Which actually bedevils our relationship with landscape. We can become very, very much immune, if you like, to more information, because too much information stops something being beautiful. And we realised through doing this that there are some aspects of experience which cannot be brought into or have not been brought into the whole discussion about managing the estuary. Our understanding of what place is about is actually that sense of ownership and belonging. The fact that people really do want to belong in a particular place. They identify with a particular landscape.
I mean, what's been really nice in allowing people to go out and investigate things on their own terms, in their own way, and us be able to then kind of reflect on what they've done, talk to them about what they've done. You know, we've disseminated, you know, those projects in their infancy on our website and through social media.
Yeah.
And people are engaging with that. People are following our blog. They follow us on social media. People are liking the stuff that's coming out, because I think even those who haven't signed up to this, you know, are probably going out and getting that same sense of looking, of observing, of seeing things that they perhaps haven't noticed before, and then seeing them again, or seeing them in a different light on another visit. And I think this sounding change element has actually gone beyond the people that are actively involved, because I think based on the way in which people are interacting with it on social media, there are people out there who are not signed up to this but are clearly engaged with it. And I think that's, again, a really important kind of step.
And I think that happens with a lot of things on the river. You know, that something like that, you find that there's lots of different versions about how something happened and why it's the way it is, and which particular event precipitated a wall being breached or whatever. And it has to be made into a good story. What becomes most important is people's relationship with the place.
Mm.
Do you see what I mean? That it's actually that sense of being part of something means you're sort of privy to information, which may be true, but hey, who knows?